Welcome to Indus Special. I'm Ejaz Haider. Talks between the Afghan Taliban and the United States continue in Doha. 11 days into the talks, it is clear that any resolution of the 18-year conflict will not be easy and might be very slow. This despite the fact that these talks offer probably the most promising possibility so far in a long-drawn conflict. The US president wants to get out of Afghanistan and the Taliban want to cap their victory. Yet, as has been reported, one major issue that might be thwarting progress is a disagreement over the definition of terrorist and terrorism. Bridging the linguistic, legal and perceptual differences on this question are important because the two sides have already agreed in principle on a framework for two central issues: the withdrawal of American troops and a commitment that Afghan soil would not again be used to launch terrorist attacks against the United States and its allies. The first is important for the Taliban to declare victory. The second is vital for the US. The Taliban have said they would not allow Afghanistan to be used as a launching pad for international attacks. American negotiators have insisted on specifying that Afghanistan not be used by terrorist groups, but the Taliban have resisted, saying there was no universal definition of terrorism, and this is just the beginning. There are a score of other issues and details that still need to be sorted out, and the devil, as they say, lies in details. To discuss where the talks are headed, we have with us Zahid Hussain, who is a writer and analyst and joins us from Islamabad, and Wahidullah Ghazikhail, who is director of Asia Studies Center and is based in Kabul. But before I come to the panel, let me also put forward what the Afghan Taliban spokesperson has said regarding the negotiations process. And I quote, "Everyone is aware that detailed discussions are taking place in the Qatari capital of Doha between the negotiation team of Islamic Emirate and the United States regarding the complete independence and sovereignty of our beloved homeland, Afghanistan. Since the issue of Afghanistan has two aspects, with one being foreign and the other internal, the current negotiations concern the foreign aspect, which is related to the United States. This phase is about fleshing out the details of the two issues which were agreed upon in the last round of talks in January: the withdrawal of all occupying forces from Afghanistan and not allowing Afghanistan to harm others. Comprehensive discussions are taking place about these subjects. Other issues that have an internal aspect and are not tied to the United States have not been held under discussion." This is very important, and we'll come to this during our panel discussion. As some individuals and circles are trying to connect other topics to these discussions, they are either unaware or are pursuing an agenda. No one should pay any heed to the rumors of these self-interested circles. So let me begin with Wahidullah Ghazikhail. Wahidullah Ghazikhail, I've read out the Taliban spokesperson's statement. Let's begin with getting your sense of what they mean by that nothing internal to Afghanistan is being negotiated or talked about at this particular point in time.
You know, Afghan conflict has three sides. One is the international, one is the regional, and the third is internal. Taliban said that our Emirat destroyed by the US, NATO. We want to solve our problem first with the international, especially with Americans. After that, we will talk with the Afghan political leaders and Afghans. They have already talked with them in Moscow conference. And the end of the March or mid of the March, maybe there will be other conference between Afghan leaders, political leaders, and Taliban in Doha. I'm sure that there will be some people from the government side. Government already promised the people that they will change the negotiation team, which was all governmental people. But this time they will have some political influence people in their negotiation team. But we are hope that Americans, especially Mr. Ambassador Khalilzad, tweeted that he is happy from the negotiation, and today was off because of Friday. Tomorrow they will start it again, the negotiation. And the good news that Foreign Minister of the United States is coming, and he will meet with the second person of the Taliban, Mr. Mullah Biradar, there. And I'm sure that they will reach to an agreement People are very hopeful for that. Secondly, they will talk with Afghans, and it's important to solve the problems. And we Afghans don't want the foreign troops in Afghanistan. We want their economically supports to do it with, to continue with Afghanistan, not the military supports. Our soldiers, our national army are in that stage to defend our country, our nation. We hope that American will continue their economically, financially support to Afghanistan, not the military support. In the last 18 years, NATO, America, Afghan government not beat the Taliban, and Taliban not beat the NATO, America, and Afghan government. It means that fight has and war has no winner. No one win the
war. Okay, we understand
Afghanistan.
that. We understand that, and one of the reasons the Americans want to get out is also precisely this, that there is no military solution here. After 18 years of conflict, no one has really won, and by not losing, in fact, one can argue that Taliban have actually won. But here's my other question. We know that Mullah Baradar is not directly participating in these talks because he also has health problems, but he's there, of course. Stanekzai is leading the negotiations. But we are told that every time there has been an impasse or there's been a logjam, that it's Mullah Baradar and Zalmay Khalilzad who sit together and try and work that out. Is that your report also?
Yes, they have already meet each other, but Mr. Abbas Stanekzai is already in the picture, and he was the heading of the negotiation from the Taliban side. And Taliban also claimed that Mullah Baradar will not sit in our meetings, but he will lead us, and he's the second person. They will get his advice, and he will sit with the foreign ministry of the United States. And yes, but he is the second person, and he is the popular person there. But Mr. Abbas Stanekzai was already in the picture, and he's leading
Correct.
that. And yes.
Yes. Okay. Let me go to Zahid Hussain in Islamabad. Hussain, how do you look at this round? I mean, there's an overall sense that this time, when these talks started, there was a lot of optimism. Of course, there was a clear sense that it's not going to, things won't just work out very easily, but that both the sides appear to be serious, and the seriousness could lead to some framework, and that framework, a two-point framework we have already seen, has come into place, and now, of course, they're further negotiating. What do you think of the definitional problems that they're facing with reference to terrorism and terrorists? Do you think this is solvable?
Look, actually, there has been a significant progress in the dialogue, and as you have said earlier, that it's not going to be easy. This kind of peace process after 18 years of war is not going to happen sooner. But certainly, I think it has the progress has been made beyond our imagination, because most of the people were predicting that it will go nowhere. But I think at least they are actually close to some kind of agreement on a framework for talk. There is still no structured talks happening at this point of time. What they're trying to do is to thresh out the structure on which further talks could be made. I think probably it's going to happen, because some of the definition, they are creating a lot of problem. Generally, and I think probably on principle, both sides have agreed on these 2 points, that withdrawal, a time frame for withdrawal, and also actually that Afghanistan will not be used for as a center for terrorist activity across the globe, or against America particularly. Now the problem is that, there's also actually that there's some problem with the timeline, because Americans are insisting that at least actually it should not be immediate withdrawal, and their discussion is going on.
Zahid Hussain, we'll come to that. We'll come to the timeline of withdrawal, but just stick to first to this definitional thing about terrorism and terrorist. Now, the Taliban have already agreed in the previous round that the Afghan soil will not be used for attacking any other state. The Americans want them to specify and use the term terrorism and to say that the Afghan soil will not be used for any terrorist attack on the US or its allies. Now, the Taliban is saying that we cannot use this term because there is no consensus, and they're right actually, under international law there is no real consensus on what terrorism or terrorist is. So my point is, do you think that they can find some common ground there and whether the Americans will accept the fact that when the Taliban say that Afghan soil will not be used for attacks on any other state, that would suffice?
Well, actually, Taliban have agreed to this basic principle that it will not be used against.
I agree with you, but
country.
it's the American stress on the word terrorist that's creating a problem.
That's coming to that. That's basically a kind of this point of detail, because you know that one problem with Taliban is that they have been fighting this war for the last 18 years. The commanders on the field are very strong, and they have been fighting for a certain cause. So there is a worry that if terrorism is seen as a broad in a broad term, then actually it could be applied to anything. Like, for example,
Correct.
Taliban are fighting, and they could claim that they are fighting against a occupation army. So will it also be considered an act of terrorism? So I think these details are very important. So one thing is that Afghan territory will not be allowed to use against any foreign country. But does it mean that the fighting which is going on, or the struggle for against the occupation army, will it also be considered as an act of terrorism? So basically, I think probably ultimately they will have to agree to this.
And there, of course, there are multiple United Nations General Assembly resolutions that make it very clear that any armed struggle against occupation or a colonizer or any kind of repression is not terrorism. It is an act of freedom struggle. Those UNGA resolutions are very much still there. But on a slightly tangential note here, just juxtapose this. And I think the Taliban are making a very interesting and a very important point here. But juxtapose that with what we have said about the Pulwama attack officially, also saying that it was a terrorist attack when it was not, because it was mounted against a hard military target. And I had been saying this, that we need to be very careful about what kind of language we use. And I was very amused that the Taliban have actually, said that this is a word that we cannot use. So they are more than us. They are aware of the fact that there are linguistic, definitional, and legal problems with the use of the word terrorist.
Well, actually, as you know, in the conflict zone, there has been militant activities, and when the army is using force, then obviously the people who are victim of that attack will also be using force. So that is one of the things, like if in Pulwama case, you have noticed that even the foreign media, New York Times and others, have never used the Pulwama attack as a terrorist attack. It was called militant attack, but not the terrorist attack. And exactly same thing in Afghanistan. For example, actually the fighting is still going on. There is no ceasefire. And Afghanistan is occupied territory. So what if the Taliban are using force? Will it be considered an act of terrorism? And I think probably these details are very important when you are actually going into this kind of a peace dialogue. So I think if it is left, if vacuum is left and undefined, then there will be going to be a lot more problem when we move forward.
Okay. Stay with me, Zahid Hussain. Let me just cross over off the border again to Wahidullah Ghazikhail. Mr. Ghazikhail, what is your sense of the Taliban insistence that they cannot use the word terror or terrorism because that means they would be delegitimizing their own 18-year-old insurgency against occupation forces. What do you say to that?
I agree with them. After when the Taliban Tahrir movement started in 1994 to 2001, they have not used Afghanistan against other countries. It was Al-Qaeda that they attacked in the US. Taliban is not threat to the regional countries, to Central Asia, to South Asia, and I'm sure, and the Taliban will not use Afghanistan against any other countries, and there will be guarantee from some countries. In my information, there is already some teams are working on the guarantee letters from the Norway, from the United States. They are already in Doha, and they are working on the draft of the agreement. And I'm sure that Taliban will not allow any other terrorist group like Daesh, like Al-Qaeda or others to use Afghanistan against other regional country or America or their alliance.
So you also said, Ghazikhail, that in the next phase, there is a possibility of the Taliban also meeting with other Afghan leaders. Now, are we saying that, and you also said that there's a possibility of some people from the government also as being part of those negotiations. So, does that mean that this is a certain kind of mechanism in and through which the Taliban will be circumventing the problem of directly talking to Kabul by having a broader Afghan delegation, which includes the political opposition also, which might have some representation from the government also, and various other, civil society members. And that is where the internal issues will be discussed. Is that what you said in your previous intervention?
Yes, Taliban will meet the political leaders, but unfortunately, inside the government, there is two types of people that they are against the Taliban. One type of people, they are non-Pashtun, and they think that all the Taliban are Pashtun. Will they join the government, Pashtun percentage will be increased, and they are against them. They are using some of the civil society, especially the women's, and they think that when the Taliban are coming to Afghanistan, it means that they are delivering the system to the Taliban, but it's not true. Taliban will join the government in the power, and they will, in the power sharing, there will be some ministries will be given to the Taliban, not the whole system. And the Taliban also not bring, or they don't want but Emarat. They will respect, but there will be some reforms in the constitution and the ANA, National Army, or some other ministries. There will be some reforms. We are agree with that. There is a need for the reforms. But we are happy that the Taliban are agreeing. They will meet with the political leaders, and this time the political leaders will ask the Taliban to meet with the negotiation team from the Afghan government side. And I hope that they will agree with that and will sit with the civil societies, with the women's. 2 or 3 women were already in the Moscow conference, and they meet them, and they were very happy from the Taliban, and they discussed with the Taliban many issues, especially the women rights issues and human rights issues. They discuss, and Taliban were agree. Taliban agreed to allow the women for education and to do the politics and go to the offices.
Wahidullah Ghazikhail, are you saying that the Taliban, in terms of their approach to governance, in terms of their approach to women and women's rights, have come a long way from the time that they really oppressed the women and other disadvantaged sections of the Afghan society? Have they been educated over the years and they realized that the way they acted previously was not the right way to go about this?
I'm sure that Taliban will allow all these things, but they will need reforms. But inside in the government saying that they are ready to sit with the Taliban and solve the problems.
Okay.
But some civil societies They are against them, yes.
Okay. Thank you so much, Wahidullah Ghazi, for being with us. Before I wrap up, Zahid Hussain, what do you think of how the Taliban, have they come a long way from where they were back in the 90s?
Yes, surely. They cannot. They know it very well that it cannot be the same kind of control, Taliban control, and unitary form of government in Afghanistan. It will not be acceptable. Afghanistan has changed tremendously, and I think probably there is a realization about it. When Taliban are negotiating at this point of time, they are also accepting that Afghanistan is going to a pluralistic society. It's not going to be the same kind of one-party system or Taliban ruling the country. That's not going to happen, and nobody would allow that. So, in a way, actually, to say that, to say that Taliban will control everything and they will take over Kabul, that will not be happening.
So what do you think? What do you think? Quickly, last question. What do you think of the spoilers within the government that Ghazikhail was also talking about?
Well, there are differences of views in Afghanistan, and because there is a fear, and there are some genuine fear. I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but there is genuine fear that will actually Taliban, even if they dominate the government. It does not matter whether they control the government entirely, but even if they are dominating the government or the part of the government, they might try to reverse some of the reforms which has taken place in Afghan society, and particularly in relations to the women's rights. So all those things are concerned, and obviously this going to be these details can be discussed in the
They'll obviously be worked out when the Taliban meet with the rest of the delegation from Afghanistan, the opposition leaders. Thank you so much, Zahid Hussain, for speaking with us. So we're going to take a short break. At the other end of the break, we will discuss the impact of nuclear weapons in the recent crisis between India and Pakistan. Stay with us. Welcome back to Indus Special. When India decided to aggress against Pakistan on 26th February using its Air Force, Pakistan responded conventionally and convincingly. However, in this second short speech, Pakistani Prime Minister Imran Khan, while talking about how wars begin because of miscalculations and advising caution to India, also said that both sides possess weapons that can destroy the two sides. This was a clear signal to the presence of nuclear weapons in the matrix. Today, we shall discuss whether there is a band in which the two sides can play conventionally, or whether India needs to understand that upping the conventional ante could lead to a dangerous spiral. So we have with us Dr. Nayyar, a former professor of physics. Dr. Nayyar has done a lot of work on the issue of disarmament, and as someone who opposes nuclear weapons, he has written about that, talked about that. He's also done a lot of work in the area of education in Pakistan, or shall I say the lack thereof in Pakistan. And we also have Dr. Rabia Akhtar with us, who is head of the Department School of Integrated Social Sciences at the University of Lahore. And she's also a member of Prime Minister's Advisory Council on Foreign Affairs and is a nuclear historian. Let me kick off with Dr. Nayyar. Dr. Nayyar, what do you say about the stability or instability or the paradox that inheres in this kind of situation?
Yes, there is this difficulty with brandishing nuclear weapons, that you have this paradox, stability paradox, where if you, though two countries possessing nuclear weapons and threatening the use of nuclear weapons, can intimidate each other enough so that under the overhang of nuclear weapons, they can go on to use conventional means in the conflict and have wars, either direct wars or indirect wars, minor wars, minor skirmishes, and so on. So while there is this stability that comes in because of nuclear weapons, there is always this instability that comes in because you think that under the overhang of nuclear weapons, you can actually continue to wage minor wars with your enemies. So that with the assumption is that both the actors are rational actors, and they know that the cost of going nuclear is going to be unacceptable, and therefore they would not cross the threshold and continue to remain within the domain of minor skirmishes. Now, this is where this is the essence of the paradox, and I think those countries which have nuclear weapons and are in conflict with each other would necessarily go into this kind of mode, where they would continue to gain as much for themselves as possible under the overhang of nuclear threats, and in doing so, they will continue to incite the adversary for reaction, and this action-reaction thing can actually at times lead to some very, very precarious situations. And I think this is what we have been seeing in the case of India and Pakistan. Since they have become overtly nuclear, they have actually been kind of waging minor wars against each other, not necessarily direct, at times indirect wars through proxies, in such a manner that the other person is provoked, and in the reaction to the provocation, the temperature between them rises to a level where the international world, the big powers, start to worry about them and come in and try and calm down things. This is something that precisely is what happened in this episode as well.
Okay. I'm going to take cue from what you, the instability, stability paradox 101 that you talked about with such clarity. So I'm going to ask this question, put it to Dr. Rabia Akhtar, but Dr. Nayyar, I also come back to you with the same question. So Rabia, the thing is that during the Cold War, as you know, there was the center held. The center, they realized after a while that it could not be destabilized, but the periphery got terribly destabilized in terms of proxy wars and the rest of it, and ideological wars, of course, between the two camps and the proxies. But in our case, in the case of India and Pakistan, the proxy war or the instability has to be at the subconventional level. Now, India, since Kargil and also after the Twin Peaks crisis, has been thinking in terms of using punitive conventional strikes against Pakistan just below the nuclear threshold. Do you think that that is something which can be done in light of this present crisis, or that there is a constant danger that if you do try to operate in that band conventionally, that there could always be a miscalculation and you could sort of have that spiral that ultimately goes right up to the nuclear weapons?
Thank you, Ejaz. I think deterrence requires nuclear instability. And I think this threat of escalation is exactly what gives legitimacy to deterrence. I think India, what it has tried to do, has moved from its first strategical strikes to strategical strikes 2.0, thinking that Pakistan, as the literature predicts Pakistan's behavior, would not retaliate conventionally in any manner and would resort to the threat of use of nuclear weapons like the literature predicts Pakistan would do. But the fascinating thing that has happened, that I see in this, is that Pakistan has not behaved predictably. And that is has come as a shock not only to the Indians, but also to the to very seasoned American or Western academics who have been predicting Pakistan's behavior as the one that would give in early on in the crisis, would not want to escalate the crisis and use the threat of nuclear weapons to back India off. When Snyder won, all he had going on for him was the inferiority of U.S. Conventional forces vis-a-vis Soviet Union in the early 1950s, which led the United States to use the threat of nuclear retaliation to stop advancing Soviet forces on the in Western Europe. And so scholars among scholars over a period of decades have actually looked at Pakistan and India from that prism and predicted that Pakistan, because it is conventionally inferior to India, it cannot fight a long conventional war or even a brief one for that matter.
I'm happy that you're pointing to this, Rabia, because let me add something and ask you if you agree with me here. I think there was also in all this, scholarship, if I might call it that, and also among the policy wonks, somehow everyone had convinced themselves that when India opens, it will necessarily win the opening round. And once it wins the opening round, it will become extremely difficult for Pakistan to then escalate because it will get diplomatically isolated, it will also draw international opprobrium, and therefore it will have to stay its hand. I.e., the corollary of this was that India will have successfully conducted its strike, and Pakistan will have to just simply lump it. Now, do you agree with how they assessed the situation? Of course, they did it wrongly, but that's my reading is that that is what their assessment was.
Absolutely, and I absolutely agree with you here, Ejaz. But I would also throw in the leadership variable, which is so understudied in Pakistan's case. Because the way things have been playing out in the past 20 years, or even when Pakistan was at the threshold state, or even starting its weapons program, Pakistan has never seen any leader beyond the ones that have been playing, musical chairs with politics. So this leadership variable is also pretty new to everybody to study. And the way Pakistan has reacted and using its right of reprisal under this leadership, I think also was not taken into account. People thought that it would run to the US, it would make calls to everybody, which actually it did as the right diplomatic move to do, but did not break down under pressure or did not outrightly suggest to the international community that things are getting out of control. They attacked back, they retaliated, and then invited the international community to, pressure India, to settle the situation.
Okay. So back to Dr. Nayyar. Dr. Nayyar, this discussion, which actually started, you the one who gave us a cue to further discuss this. So I take those questions back to you that I put to Dr. Rabia Akhtar. What is your assessment?
My assessment of the way India and Pakistan have acted in recent times is that I think both have gained something. India and both have lost something. Let us try and do this sum properly. India lost something in the sense that it got a bloody nose in terms of this airplane, loss of airplane and capturing of the pilot and so on and so forth. Gain is that that Pakistan is now forced to take action against these groups, the groups who are termed as terrorist groups, who are supposed to be Pakistan's proxies working in India and have the history of having worked in India and have bothered India. Pakistan has been forced to work against them. Now this is gain for India, and gain for India because India has been trying to do that for a very long time.
But the Pakistani government is saying that we're doing this under our own national action plan.
I hope this was true. The National Action Plan came about so many years ago, and this is coming on now. So I hope this is true, but I think a person seeing it from outside Pakistan will see it as something which Pakistan is doing under pressure now. FATF is coming, Security Council resolution is coming, and this whole thing sort of boiled down at this particular time into an explosive situation between India and Pakistan, and therefore people were worried, and Pakistan had to take this action. I'm glad that Pakistan is taking this action, and I'm not at all sulking on this. I think this is what Pakistan should have been doing, should have done long ago. The gain for Pakistan is, number one, it told India that look, even for when you start wars at sub nuclear level, Pakistan is sufficiently prepared to counter it. You know, India has this whole whole plan of what are these strike called
the cold start.
What strikes, you know?
The surgical strikes, and they have the cold start.
The cold start was one thing, but then other than that, there is this
surgical strikes.
Yeah, the cold start doctrine was a part of this whole thing.
Yes.
Where the point was that you go in and you act against the terrorist act or militant groups and destroy them. So this has been India's worry for a long time, and India has been playing was trying to show at this time that it can go and do this, and Pakistan showed that it is not that easy. You cannot always succeed in doing that. The loss for Pakistan is as I said, was in changing its position that it has held so dearly for such a long time. It thought that for problem of Kashmir to be resolved, to bring India down to table, there was no way but to keep the problem completely boiling all the time. And for that, trying to create a situation, you need to tell people to continue and go and do something, for which Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba, etc., have been, at hand at one time. And I think that part is now is changing. Pakistan has to change that tactics. We'll have to do something else.
So here's my question, Dr. Nayyar. Here's my question. See, there are multiple UNGA resolutions that talk about freedom struggles and armed struggle, legitimize armed struggles against forces of occupation. One particular UNGA resolution also talks about the fact that people fighting occupation can also draw external support. All of this is there, legitimately there, and is part of international law. Of course, we know that India has tried previously also, but especially after 9/11, to plug its narrative into the larger global narrative on terrorism. And we also know that there is a huge problem with the way states have tried to define terrorism and a terrorist. So my point is that why do we need to be apologetic about the fact that that Kashmiris are fighting a legitimate struggle against Indian oppression, and B, that they can resort to armed struggle, and C, that in terms of getting help, they can legitimately draw from external actors in support of their struggle. Back in 1971, Indira Gandhi had written a letter to President Nixon citing what is now called humanitarian intervention, or R2P, in order for her to send her armies into erstwhile East Pakistan. So I think my point is that we need to put all of this in a perspective.
I agree with you, and I think I fully agree with you that the attack in Pulwama was not a terrorist attack. It was against combatants, against army, against military, and therefore anybody who is who terms it as terrorist attack is wrong. I'm glad to see that the international media, BBC, CNN, and so on, do not call it a terrorist act. It is only within India that it is called terrorism, and we are happy about that. That nobody else is calling it a terrorist act. On the other hand, you see, a lot has happened in the world since then. Since 1971, when Indira Gandhi wrote that, perhaps it is always there on the statutes of the United Nations. But the point is that as soon as you involve outside powers, the state of war is going to sort of expand and create more problems.
I agree with you. Dr. Nayyar, unfortunately, this is all the time I have. I wish we could go further into the details of what you're saying about expanding the conflict, but thank you so much for giving me your insights. Before I wrap up, back to Dr. Rabia Akhtar. Do you think that the action that is being done against JEM or JUD is something where the timing is right, because as Dr. Nayyar was saying, the sense is that this is being done, under international pressure?
Ejaz, I think for the optics of it, it might be the right time to do it. Pakistan is on the grey list of FATF, and those decisions are going to be made soon. And no matter how good our intention is, it is not going to be read as such. So for the optics of the international community as to how they look at what actions Pakistan is taking, I think the time is right. But what the world needs to understand, and where our diplomacy needs to come in, is for the world to make the world understand as to why does this opportunity exist. And India, by using the word of terrorism, is trying to deflect whatever it is doing inside, Indian occupied Kashmir.
Okay.
So why Pakistan tries to palliate?
Yeah, Rabia, I have to wrap up now. I agree with you. I think I'll just add one thing, and there's got to be a quid for this quo, in the sense that, well, then come and resolve the Kashmir issue, because until that issue is resolved, there'll always be a threat of violence anyway. That's all from Indus Special today. We shall see you next week. Until then, it's goodbye.